The beginning of video games seems simplistic in today's world of immersive environments. Wearing one's virtual reality headset while interacting with the world inside of it feels far more real than the very first video game with lights on a screen. Even without the virtual reality headset, we can experience driving a car around a racetrack, dropping behind enemy lines, or battling fantastical creatures. More than one video game has been adapted into a movie, which would have been very dull indeed if one had bothered with some of the first video games. While many would point to 1962's Space War, more on that one later, as the first computer game, it actually had some predecessors. Although strictly speaking, some of the earlier video games do not meet some of the criteria of being a video game. It's really all in how one defines a video game, but for the sake of this video, we won't get lost in the is it or isn't it a video game debate. So when and where did one of those very first people decide to use the computer to have fun? We need to go back to the year of 1952. In the news, Queen Elizabeth was crowned Queen of Britain, the first Chevrolet Corvette was prototyped, and the very first Mr. Potato Head was sold. On computer screens, the game of tic-tac-toe debuted on a Cambridge computer. The Canadians also had created their own computer tic-tac-toe game called Bertie the Brain in 1950. But since the game used light bulbs rather than a screen with real-time visual graphics during play, it doesn't meet some definitions of a video game. Arguably, these computer games were just a game played with a computer instead of a piece of paper, rather than a de facto computer game. Fast forward to 1958. In the news, the US launched its first satellite into space, Jack Kilby co-invented the microchip, and Barbie was introduced and immediately soared to popularity. Meanwhile, physicist William Higginbotham served as head of the instrumentation group at Brookhaven National Laboratory. Visitors' days were held once a year. After realizing that most of the exhibits were on the dull side, Higginbotham decided to capture the attention of visitors by creating something special for his exhibit. He had a small analog computer, and knowing what the computer was capable of doing, Higginbotham dreamed up the idea for a tennis game. Together with a technician named Robert Dvorak, the game was created and dubbed Tennis for Two. While the game was simple, visitors were thrilled and formed long lines to take their turn. 2 years later, the computer was dismantled so the pieces could be used elsewhere in the lab. The game was never patented. In 1962, a game unique to computers was invented by a team of students led by Steve Russell. Dubbed Space War, the game featured 2 ships, one called Needle and one called Wedge, flying around a starry backdrop. While people today might snicker at the lack of sophistication, the game was impressive at the time. Also of note was the cost to play. With the cost of using the computers being in the dollars per minute range, many people were not thrilled that this cost would be used to play a game. That didn't stop people, however. In addition, users began to make their own modifications to the code to create their own versions of the game. Text-based games became popular, but in the 1980s people began to care about graphics. Unlike today's games that require a disc or download, early games were merely code printed in a magazine. Users would type the code into their computers and could even alter it if they wished. Consoles for gaming and PC-based games began a war for popularity, with the upper hand turning one way or the other. Today, people have more than one way to play video games. Gaming consoles are popular at the moment, but people can also play on personal computers, tablets, or even their smartphone. Many toys now incorporate aspects of video games into their play. A cheap toy has more impressive graphics and play than those early games that required computers over 6 figures, and today's money 7 figures, to play. In games, people have worked to survive the Oregon Trail, solved mysteries with Nancy Drew, or matched items to renovate a garden or home. Players have battled monsters, explored magical lands, or flown planes in World War II battles. Games have connected people from around the world and allowed them to converse and play together, even if they will probably never meet in real life. Couples have met and fallen in love in online games, which has later led to love and marriage outside of video games. From tennis for two to marriage for two, it's unlikely William Higginbotham imagined such a thing when he first decided that creating a game would be a fun way for guests at an open house to learn about computers. Whether you play games or not, computers are a part of everyday life. If you'd like to discover how our team can help your team with a custom application for your business, visit swansoftwaresolutions.com.